All right, everybody, I'd like to introduce our next keynote presentation here at the Planet MicroCap Showcase Vancouver. Up next is Tim Babcock, Vice President and Head of TSX Venture Exchange. His presentation titled Canada's Public Venture Markets TSX Venture Perspective, kind of a state of the markets. Tim, take it away.
All right, thanks everyone. So what I'm hoping to get to today, just to provide a bit of an overview of the state of the market, our perspective on what we're seeing, some of the trends that we're seeing, probably focus more on venture than TSX, which is obviously right up the alley for this get together today. So hopefully that works. I'm going to start with a little bit of a high level perspective just to provide some context in terms of the marketplaces. We'll look at some of the recent historical trends, some of the themes that we see and the influences that we see on the marketplace today. And then I'll offer a little bit of perspective on the future. So what we're seeing as important to the markets in the future and the continued success, and some of the things that we've committed to in terms of making the market better for everyone going forward. So where do we start? We'll start with Canada. Great place to do business, recognized globally. We could debate whether it could be better. I don't want to get into a conversation about government policy, so we can move on, but hopefully we can all agree that we've got a good foundation here in terms of a business climate. And from a capital markets perspective, Canada punches well above its weight on a global scale. We're among the top 5 hubs for equity capital in the world. Historically, I think as many will recognize and agree, our capital markets prowess was really driven by resource sectors. But that has changed, and that has very much evolved into a very diverse marketplace in Canada. The resource sector is still very, very important, of course, in Canadian capital markets. But what we have seen, and this is over the course of decades, is that expertise and that experience around capital markets, the entire ecosystem that supports capital markets in Canada that was born out of the resource sector has now grown to be able to support a truly diverse universe of issuers and industries. And that diversity extends beyond Canada's borders as well. As you can see here, we've got over 250 international companies listed on TSX and TSX Venture. We have a lot of international diversity, not only within the companies themselves, but in their assets. If we look just at the mining sector, almost half of the projects and properties that all of our listed companies own and operate in the mining sector are outside of Canada. And also on the trading front, almost 40% of our daily trading volume on TSX and TSX Venture comes from outside of Canada. So truly an international capital markets here in Canada. So another key contributor historically to the success of Canada's capital markets is our public venture market. The public venture market in Canada is globally unique. Particularly the 2-tier structure that we have with Toronto Stock Exchange and TSX Venture Exchange allows companies to access public equity capital at a much earlier stage in terms of their development, gives those companies the capital to grow and develop over time to become proper corporate citizens in the capital markets and ultimately graduate to TSX. As you can see, we've had over 750 companies graduate from TSX Venture to TSX since 2000. And the one stat that always grabs my attention is if we look at the S&P and TSX Composite Index, more than 1 in 5 of the constituents of that index started their life on TSX Venture Exchange. So really speaks to the importance of the public venture market to Canada's capital market generally and also Canada's economy. So with all of that as a bit of a backdrop, what has been happening over the last 5 years or so? So I just want to walk through a few of the trends that we keep an eye on, some of the things that many of you will be familiar with, but these are drivers, at least from our perspective, in terms of market activity and indicators of what's happening out there. So if we look at new listings over the last 5 years or so, I think everyone can understand and appreciate that we had a significant increase in capital markets activity in 2021. And really, there was kind of a 2-year period from the start of COVID in mid-2020 through mid-2022, where we saw a lot of increased activity in the market overall. And that is also borne out when we look at capital raising. So what was happening in terms of capital being raised across both of our markets? 2021 obviously was some increased activity. What we've seen since then, obviously, is a significant fall off of that financing activity. We look at the first couple of quarters in 2023 and even going back the last 5 quarters, really a much lower level in terms of capital being raised on TSX and TSX Venture. What we see with the venture market versus TSX is much more volatility. We see a lot bigger swings in terms of activity on the venture market. So I want to pull out the venture activity specifically. So if we look at new listings just for the venture exchange, again, we're seeing that big jump across kind of mid-2020 to mid-2022 in terms of new listings. The activity that we saw in 2018, a lot of that was driven by interest in the cannabis industry. But where we are now, certainly we've fallen off the levels of 2021, but we are still seeing activity in 2023 in terms of new listings on the venture market. If we look then at capital raised on TSX Venture Exchange across the last 5 or so years, again, big jump around 2021, has fallen off since, but we are still seeing financing activity in line with kind of pre-pandemic amounts. There were times in 2021 where we were seeing over $1 billion raised on the venture exchange per month, which is really amazing. But now we're kind of seeing those levels on a quarterly basis, so certainly less active than we saw a couple years ago. So I know this conference is focused on tech innovation. So I want to draw out some numbers around those sectors. When we talk about innovation sectors, we kind of lump together clean tech, life sciences, technology, trying to get at issuers that aren't in more traditional sectors such as finance or resources. And if we look at 2021, obviously innovation sectors really led the way in terms of new listings. And as everyone here can appreciate, the market had a vast appetite for growth stories in 2021. And of course, technology and similar issuers played a big role in that. Obviously, that activity has fallen off since, and it's really interesting to note how big that drop has been for TSX. Versus TSX Venture. We are still seeing activity on the venture market, but we're not seeing really anything over the last 3 quarters on TSX. And again, if we look at the innovation sectors and capital raised, where was that money going over the last few years? Technology really led the way in 2021. Certainly head and shoulders above the others. But what I thought was interesting here to note is even though financing activity has fallen off across the board in 2023, if we look at clean tech, we're seeing capital raised in clean tech for the first half of 2023 exceeding the full year of 2022. And this, I guess, is really not surprising, given kind of a global focus on climate change and renewable energy and electrification of vehicles and so on and so forth. But we are seeing some activity there in the clean tech sector. So also on the diversity front, we talked a little bit about international issuers. Very similar story here in terms of increased activity in 2021 and falling off since. I think one of the trends maybe that you're seeing over the course of the last few slides is that that drop off in activity was really more pronounced on TSX than on TSX Venture. So even though we're seeing, not as many new listings and not as much financings on venture, we are still seeing activity where some of that is completely absent on TSX. And I think that really goes to show, the quality of the public venture ecosystem in Canada and how that ecosystem continues to support companies and to continue to support entrepreneurs, even when the markets are tough. So the last trend I wanted to highlight before we move on is something that we've noticed over the course of the last half decade or so, and that is a trend of increasing market cap on TSX Venture. So even when markets are volatile and we're seeing some ups and downs in terms of new listing and financing, we're seeing this growth in the aggregate market cap of all issuers listed on TSX Venture. Why? I'm not sure I have the greatest idea or the greatest answer for that, but I think part of it is we know that private capital is more available now than it was, say, a decade ago. That is driving companies to stay private longer, and so they're likely coming to market a little bit more mature. I think from a venture perspective, we're probably seeing some of the smallest issuers go public on CSE and not TSXV. And we're also seeing, and this has been a trend for a decade or more as well, but the cost of being a public company has increased. And so public companies need to be more mature, and we're seeing that maturity play out in terms of the market cap of our listed issuers. So some of the trends I think that we're seeing, volatility is always front and center for the venture space. The impact of macroeconomic factors tends to have a different weight and a different timing even than on the senior market. So things like new industries, pandemics, wars and geopolitical tensions and so on and so forth, that can have a bigger impact on venture, and it can have a different impact on venture. And so sometimes the headlines don't always tell the story in terms of what's happening in the public venture space. We are, however, seeing more diversity, both from a sector perspective and internationally, and that can help buffer some of that volatility over time. And we are seeing that increase in size and maturity. I think a lot of that is driven by the prevalence of private capital and companies staying private longer. So what do we do with all this? What does this tell us about the state of the venture market in Canada and where we need to go in the future? That's certainly something that we ask ourselves. It's certainly something that is top of mind in terms of how we think about what TSX Venture should be in the future. And so in line with that, about a year ago in June of 2022, we embarked on a year-long consultation process with our stakeholders. So we reached out to issuers, investors, lawyers, basically all participants across the public venture ecosystem, and really tried to get a deeper understanding of what challenges exist in the marketplace today, what opportunities might be there for the taking in the future, and most specifically, what can we do about that? How can we influence that positively for the future? So we reached out to all these stakeholders via surveys, via our advisory committees, and ultimately through a bunch of individual one-on-one conversations that we had across the entire marketplace. We heard a lot. Just the surveys themselves, we got over 1,500 written comments in addition to all the answers on the surveys. We did a lot of kind of internal thinking and digesting of that data. We went out again for some of those deeper one-on-one conversations and really tried to understand, what role does TSX Venture play in the success of this market going forward. And where that culminated was a report that we put out that we dubbed Venture Forward in June 2023. where we highlighted some of those findings and certainly encourage everyone to go take a look at that report if they haven't already. And then it goes into detail on some key commitments that that we are putting forward in terms of what TSX Venture Exchange can do as a marketplace to ensure the continued success of this market going forward. And so I'm going to walk through some of those things. I'm not going to get into as much detail as the report itself, but I do want to highlight where we landed after taking in all that feedback around challenges, opportunities, what issuers, what investors really want to see, and some of the things that we think we can do to improve the landscape. So I've highlighted the kind of 4 key ones here, and I'll walk through each of those individually. So we'll start with the passport listings, and really what this is, and actually maybe, sorry, before I get to this, I'll take a step back, because one of the key things that we pulled out of that whole consultation process were some kind of overarching themes, and one of the themes was speed. We talked about volatility. We know that the windows of opportunity in the capital markets generally, but particularly for the venture market, those windows of opportunity can be fleeting. And so anything that we can do to improve speed of access to capital, improve speed of listings and completion of transactions, that was very important to our issuers. So one of the things we're focused on is speed. Another area that was highlighted, another theme that was highlighted through that consultation process was transparency. So, transparency of the rules for public companies, clarity on our policies, on our processes, ensuring that not only issuers, but the market generally knows how issuers are regulated in this space. A third theme that came up, and this was very important for issuers, was showcasing our issuers to investors. Now, we do a fair bit of that already, but there are more things that we can do to help profile our issuers to a broader investor base. And we'll touch on how we're going to address that in a moment. And the last kind of theme that we heard was, given all of the experience that we have around markets and markets in Canada, is there something we can do to bring more investors and more issuers to the market? Participants that aren't looking at our markets today, is there a way that we can welcome perhaps a diverse group of, an even more diverse group of issuers and investors to the marketplace? So this first commitment that I'll talk about, the passport listings, is a lot of this is around that speed theme. And so what we're looking to do is develop a process and criteria to identify our most advanced and ready listing applicants and move them through our new listing review process much quicker. This isn't about reducing our listing requirements. This isn't about cutting corners on a review process, but looking for ways that we can partner with new listing applicants to be more efficient in that process and be better at communicating and sharing information. So this is something that we're building some context and some details around right now. Stay tuned for more details on that in the next couple months, and hopefully we'll launch something that is of interest to the community. Second commitment that we've highlighted is digital transformation. This is really continuing the work that we've done over the last 5+ years in terms of modernizing our processes and engaging with issuers much more efficiently. So we're looking to use technology to make the issuer experience much better. So a lot of this is built off our issuer interaction platform that we launched a few years ago called TMX Links. We are doing a lot of work around how we make our filing process more efficient, how we give issuers access to more tools, more resources, more of the products that we offer them to help them with navigating the capital markets, make those more easily available through technology. So we've invested millions in this platform, and we're committed to continue to do so for the betterment of the issuer experience. Next item is TSX Venture Sandbox. Some of you may be familiar with the TSX sandbox that was launched a number of years ago. Our senior market has had some good success with that. We've recognized, of course, that the pace of change in the capital markets has really accelerated over the last, say, 5 to 10 years. And so what we're hoping to do with the TSXV sandbox is to embrace and encourage that innovation in our market and allow us to engage with perhaps more novel issuers or more novel structures that might want to access our market. So giving us a place to do that has a little bit less structure. So once again, we're working on some deeper communication around this to come in the next couple of months, so stay tuned. And the last of the kind of big four commitments that I'll touch on is this concept of a new and highly differentiated exchange. This commitment is a little bit different than the others. We're not actually committing to deliver anything yet. What we're committing to is to pursue a deeper investigation of is there something new, something differentiated, some different type of exchange model or concept that we can introduce that brings new investors, new issuers to our market that aren't participating today. One can use your imagination and think of all sorts of different ideas, but we know that with things like, to use cryptocurrency just as one simple example, but we know that there are participants in capital markets, or at least capital markets adjacent type activities that we're not engaging with today. And so we're looking for ways that we might change that for the future. So we've got a deep investigation process that has already started, will be ongoing for months. We're hoping to bring to the public some concept or concepts in 2024 to be pursued further. So that report, the Venture Forward report, also touched on 6 other commitments. I won't go into details on this. Certainly happy to engage separately or leave everybody to review the reports. But all of these are themed around building more efficiency into our processes and our engagement with issuers, reducing costs for our issuers, bringing more capital to our market, helping issuers better engage with that capital, and also using our role as leaders in the exchange space in Canada to advocate for our issuers. So if I can sum up kind of what my perspective is, at least on what we're seeing and the state of the markets. Obviously, we've got continued volatility and uncertainty in the public venture market. I don't think that will ever go away, but I think it's something that we all are cognizant of. We know that the timing and impact of macro trends can be different than the senior market. So I think it is important to look closely at what's happening in the venture space as opposed to just the big headlines on the big media sites. We know we've had historical growth in diversity and maturity of issuers. We know that change will continue in this marketplace going forward. But I think we also know, and this is something that was very clear to us as we embarked on our consultation process, was we have a very strong and resilient ecosystem around the public venture market in Canada, and we have a lot of passion around that market as well. So it's great to know that we have this great foundation from which to continue to build going forward. And I think we also know the importance of the venture market to Canada's capital market generally and to Canada's economy. I think the contributions are evident everywhere you look in terms of what the venture space has meant to Canada. So just to close up, TSX Venture is committed to all of our stakeholders in this marketplace, committed to making this market better as best we can. And we are absolutely open for dialogue at any time for anyone who has suggestions on ways that we can do that more. And happy to take any questions that anyone may have. Yeah.
I guess I'll talk about the elephant in the room just to have a conversation going. So So I guess, I mean, what are your views on crypto in lieu of, like, a couple of years ago, like, the venture exchanges in Canada were quite innovative in how they dealt with crypto. Then, as we know, what's happened is, like, the SEC has essentially, and the U.S. Bank has essentially cut off the fiat rails to crypto, and they're kind of saying, don't touch crypto. So the SEC is holding the line against crypto, but whenever the SEC gets dragged into court, they're losing court cases. You know, BlackRock now is trying to get an ETF going to restore it. So I guess right now we're in limbo. Nobody wants to touch crypto with a 10-foot pole, justifiably so. But have you guys had discussions? What really happens if BlackRock and Arcwood and Fidelity, all these big guys, succeed in, you know, kind of legalizing Bitcoin ETFs, Ethereum ETFs, and that would kind of be blessed that. I mean, do you have any kind of public views you want to share on that? Because at one point, you guys are kind of quite innovative in grappling with the crypto problem, but now, obviously, you know, no one's touching that right now. So what happens if we can all touch it again, I guess?
Yeah, I think, well, I'm by no means an expert in this space, but I think we have to differentiate between the U.S. and Canada, because I think when people look at the regulatory environment for crypto and crypto exchanges and funds and so on in Canada, I think a lot of pundits would say that we're far ahead of the U.S. And certainly we have crypto ETFs in Canada. So I think we're a step forward. I think there's still a lot to kind of be figured out as to what role crypto and that technology has in capital markets generally. But I feel like the regulatory space in Canada, even though it may not be perfect, at least is more transparent and more understood. Unfortunately, no. So there's no kind of, you know, there's no reciprocal kind of regulation there. So you'd have to essentially, if you keep your ASX listing, you'd end up with two sets of reporting requirements, one in Canada and one in Australia. Well, it's easier because you're already public, so you already have audited financial statements. You already have a base of shareholders. So there are some of those quick things that you can kind of check off the list. Yep. Yes. Yeah. And great that you asked that. And it was kind of one thing that I was thinking how to work that into the conversation, because we've seen very similar trends to what we have on the financing new listing fronts. Obviously, a big pop in 2021, certainly spurred by meme stocks and retail participation and so on. And that has fallen off. There's no question about it. And that's kind of across the board. I think, again, the volatility in trading activity for the venture market is much more pronounced than in the senior market. And that's, you know, similar to kind of all the stats that we saw here. So how we bring more liquidity to the venture market, again, are things that we're trying to do around attracting more investors to this marketplace, looking at ways that we might be able to facilitate research on more venture companies and bring more attention to our market. So there's a few ideas that we have around how we might be able to continue to increase that liquidity for all of our issuers, but it is a challenge, no question about it. I think we've seen a little bit more M&A activity as, you know, companies are looking to do more with less, you know, in looking at, you know, say an entity that has some cash and an entity that has a really good asset and trying to bring those together as opposed to going out to raise new funds. In terms of corporate buybacks, on the venture market, very few and far between. We don't have a lot of corporate buybacks. On the senior market, we certainly do. And that the pace of issuer bids on the senior market seems to have accelerated, particularly with the looming introduction of a new 2% tax coming in January 1st, 2024 in Canada. So that impending increased taxation on corporate buybacks is spurring a lot more activity on the senior market. Yeah, I can't speak to the details, but certainly we have looked and continue to look at how can we better facilitate U.S. investor access to all of our market. And that is, things like looking at the blue sky, also looking at ways that we might be able to work more closely with OTC markets. But it's a really tough nut to crack. I think we've had a really challenging time kind of getting into the broker-dealer community in the U.S. and facilitating that cross-border trading. Yeah. Yeah. Yes. Yeah. Yes, it is. I agree. Yeah, again, I'm not as well versed in those regulations as perhaps you are, but I think we have looked at, continue to look at it. Whether there's an opportunity there for us, I think it might be more challenging for us as a Canadian operation to to get the ears of the state lawmakers, but it's something to pursue for sure. I think we may have run out of time. Any last questions? Excellent. Thank you.